Good evening. Let me begin by recognising the traditional guardians of this land, the Kulin Nation, and paying my respects to their elders, past and present. Immediately next to me is Kevin Leyton-Brown. He's also a professor of computer science at UBC in Canada. He's done a lot of interesting work applying AI to a bunch of different problems, including helping people in the third world, and I think maybe we'll hear about some of that later. And then furthest away from me is someone who spends his whole life thinking about the future. Stefan, and I'm terrible with pronouncing it. You
Hajkowicz.
Thank you. Who
I'm not really sure.
Is our resident futurist in CSIRO. So the topic tonight for the conversation is technological unemployment, the impact that AI and automation in general is going to have on our work lives. So I want to begin, and I've got a very nice quote that I wanted to start with, so I'm going to read this quote. "We're being afflicted with a new disease, of which some readers may not have heard the name, but of which they will hear a great deal in the years to come, namely technological unemployment." I think Stefan probably recognises it now. No, I won't put you on the spot, don't worry.
Do I have to guess who said it?
Yeah, if you want. No, okay. It was the famous economist John Maynard Keynes, and he was writing that in 1930. But if we think, at least up to the GFC, he was wrong, wasn't he? It didn't afflict us. Unemployment rates are at historical low levels, up just before the GFC at least. Population had increased as ever, and so more people were being employed on the planet. We were working perhaps a slightly shorter week, but...
Well, economic research has shown us unambiguously that over the long term, technology and trade with other countries is associated with better job outcomes, better salaries, more employment, better job outcomes for the population, but not everyone. That's there are the whole transition that the North England manufacturing sector made, fueled by tech and also opening up trade. That was not great for communities in there. So I think that's the thing. So John Maynard Keynes is partly right for some people. We have seen technology-fueled unemployment, but overall it's undoubtedly associated with higher incomes and better employment outcomes. The problem is, I think, both the geographic and temporal expression of that, and that the Industrial Revolution, the first 60 years of that, saw incomes decline in England and Wales. Life expectancy went down as people were subject to unsafe working conditions. It took about 60, 70 years before the benefits happened, and then they happened quite steeply. There's an economic historian who studied wages and life expectancy during the 100-year Industrial Revolution. And that's what the graph shows us. From 1760 to 1840 or so, it's a decline in life expectancy and a decline in wages, and then bang, it all starts to change. So if the information revolution began in the 80s, we're in for still some miserable times before it gets better.
So certainly if you look at some of the economic graphs post-GFC, there seems to be some change happening. Those graphs start to look
on aggregate, the US economy's done great post-GFC. You know, it's returned to high levels of GDP per capita, and GDP growth has been strong, and in Australia as well, but salaries haven't kept pace. In Australia, we're in this period of flatlining wages with real GDP going up. And this is what's causing people so much pain, and this is why a percent on the mortgage on the mortgages is really tips Australia over into a really bad place at the moment, and that's happening in America as well. So some of the arguments are that technology is making that possible, that we need fewer workers to achieve more economic output because technology is deployed into the economy.
So to go back to one of your earlier claims, which was that if we look historically, that technology has always created more jobs than it's maybe destroyed. Mm-hmm. But there's no fundamental law of economics that requires that to be the case.
There's a lot of empirical evidence. I think it does happen. Technology increases productivity, and productivity that's a ratio of inputs to outputs. Part of me is an economist as well as those other things, which I try not to admit. But Its productivity is inputs, the ratio of inputs to outputs. In the long term, Paul Krugman tells us this is everything for wealth creation, and it is. If we increase productivity, technology and innovation is what leads to productivity gains in the economy. That builds wealth and prosperity, which is transferred into more jobs and better jobs and higher pay. It happens in time. It just doesn't happen everywhere, and it doesn't happen straight away. You know, all of the technology we had in the Industrial Revolution has been great for wages and incomes. Our wages and incomes and life expectancy way better today than it was in 1700. It just took quite some time, and the people benefiting weren't all the people.
But it also took some other things, right? We introduced unions,
right,
labour laws, the
right,
welfare state, universal education. It wasn't that the technology alone gave us those benefits,
so
but
that's why the debate on the living wage is really interesting, and we should be looking at it. You know, we actually should look at the Industrial Revolution and learn from what happened there. Inequality is rising in the world that we're in, and again, we can debate about the extent to which technology is causing that or other factors, but it is definitely rising. Gini coefficient, when it's zero, everyone
the Gini coefficient is a measure of how unequal society is.
That's right. At zero, everyone has the same. At one person has all the money and nobody else. So Australia is about 0.34. Denmark, Norway, those countries are around 0.22.
Much better.
They are. And there's a lot to show that a lower Gini coefficient is a better place to live. Absolutely. US is 0.39, heading upwards. UK going, Mexico 0.55, and it is not that nice a place to live.
No.
It can be a nice show. I shouldn't make a blanket statement about Mexico, but yeah, it's kind of...
The drug barons will be after you.
Needs wall.
It is home, of course, to the third world, Mr. Slim, the third wealthiest man, I think, at the moment on the planet.
Yeah, right.
But
anyway,
Kevin, is this time...
I didn't want to interrupt you. You seem like you're having a nice conversation.
I wanted to bring you in the conversation as well. Isn't this time going to be different? I mean, we used to... In previous revolution, the Industrial Revolution, we got the manual labour replaced, but we still had a cognitive advantage over the machines. But are we going to have any advantage over the machines moving forwards?
Well, I guess the question is an advantage in doing what? I mean, there's so much going on here, talking about the Industrial Revolution and current economic changes. I'm not sure, exactly whether we're comparing apples to apples in all of these different scenarios. I think the premise of what we're trying to talk about here is, whether technological changes due to AI are going to lead to.
But we can look at automation, not just AI as a whole.
Sure. I mean, I would sort of favor not trying to draw much of a distinction between AI and automation. So absolutely.
If someone takes your job with a machine or a new process, I don't think you care really who it was.
But I guess as you said, maybe this time is different because AI is has the potential to displace people in ways that other technologies couldn't. Maybe. I mean, I guess first of all, we have to ask whether that's true, and secondly, we have to ask whether it would be so bad if it happened. In terms of whether it's true, there are undoubtedly things that people do today that we can reasonably expect automation, AI, new technologies will do better than people in the foreseeable future. I mean, now would not be a good time to be in university studying to be a radiologist. It doesn't. And that's a skilled white-collar occupation, but radiologists interpret complicated images to try to figure out whether a scan shows evidence of a disease, and this is already a task that computer systems do at least as well as people, and they're only getting better. So there are these kinds of tasks that clearly change is coming. I wouldn't want to be a legal clerk today. This is another kind of specific job that looks rough.
Well, let's go back to medical specialism.
Sure.
Is there, apart from surgeon, is there any medical specialist that you'd actually recommend someone to go and study today?
I mean, I don't know how you feel about being in the hospital, but I wouldn't want a robot nurse.
Massage therapy. Not likely to be automated. Robots cannot do massages.
Well, you get massage chairs.
It's not the same.
Not the same. Okay. You like the human touch, do you, Stefan?
Well, I actually hate massages, but I know a lot of people who do like them, and the chairs you can get and all that sort of stuff doesn't work. Yeah. Same with baristas. We should be able to automate coffee.
But these were very well-paid jobs. I don't know what the current rate for a massage therapist, but certainly they were much less than radiologists.
Yeah. Well, I actually think radiologists are going to be around. So spreadsheets didn't kill off accountants. Smart accountants learned how to use them and got better jobs. Radiography, I was at a session this morning where Brisbane's head best radiographer was talking to us actually, and he was showing us how they're using AI to make a lot more out of the imagery they're looking at so that they can go a lot more down the path of diagnosis, prognosis, working out the best sort of treatment. They're able to tell a hell of a lot more via not just better imagery techniques, but all the algorithms and software that's running on the image can work out what it's looking at a whole lot better. So,
well, that's a good point. I think radiology is maybe an edge case where many of the things radiologists do today are likely to be displaced.
Right.
But for most jobs, and maybe as you say, even for radiologists, it's much more about technology coming in and displacing some of the things that people do in their job rather than destroying a job category.
But
so it's much more likely the jobs will change, I think.
I think that's it. So, and this is the Frey and Osborne paper from the University of Oxford that told us 47% of all jobs getting done by a robot that has been replicated a lot and has been, rejected really. Well, it's been criticised a lot. The OECD paper took it down to 9%. It's that the guy who pours the cement at my place tomorrow apparently is at high risk of automation. But when you look at the task he's got, there's a tree in the way. There's all these little complexities that even the most advanced AI we have today will not be able to solve because of Moravec's paradox, Toby, which you first told me about. This is a fairly simple thing. The tree creates some awkwardness. If a robot was trying to solve it, I bet you it wouldn't get around it. It would hit it, drive into it again, would not be able to solve this problem, and human intuition is required to solve it. So I think the studies we've had which do look at technology wiping out people's jobs have way overestimated it due to some component of that job still requiring human intuition.
So just so you've learned something tonight, Moravec's paradox, that the ironic fact that the things that we find effortless to do, the things often the hardest things to get computers to do.
Although I'd be cautious about projecting that too far into the future.
But the things that we find difficult to do, like playing chess or playing Go at expert level, we can actually get computers to do with much less effort than the easy things that we do.
But there have been examples where that's really fallen, right? Like, recognizing objects in images used to be one of people's favorite examples there. That's true. And people have stopped mentioning that example because all of a sudden it's gotten a lot better.
Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
Yes.
But still, things like folding a towel or a shirt, you can do without much thought. But a computer, that's still a huge, great challenge. Anyway, let's not leave radiologists behind yet, because I still got one thing I'd like us to explore, which is that there's only a limited amount of radiology we want. Right?
Yeah,
we're not going to have more X-rays just because we've got cheaper radiologists, because of the medical risk, or because there's only a limited number of things that you can do with X-rays. So if we can get the machines to automate more and more of that process, I can't see how we're going to need as many radiologists. That your radiologist with his AI programs will be able to do much more radiology himself, and so we'll need just fewer of them.
Sure, of course we will.
So radiologists are at risk.
Well, I guess that was what I was originally asserting, but I wanted to answer the question you asked, are there any other medical jobs besides surgeons that aren't at risk? I think tons and tons of medical jobs. I don't want a robot nurse. I don't want a robot psychiatrist. I think it's crazy to think that there aren't tons of people in the world who would benefit from psychiatric services if they were less expensive, from more attention in the hospital from humans if they were available. I think we should think about the new things we would do with more labor if we could free up the radiologists.
That's true, but I hate to let you know that in Germany today there are robot therapists being used to help refugees who have arrived with post-traumatic stress from war, because Germany can't afford to give therapy to the 1 million immigrants who are arriving every year. So it may not be ideal, but it's all that they get.
It may be better than nothing, but I think if we have all kinds of unemployed medical professionals who are looking for something to do, there are lots of places where we really would be better off with people than with robots.
Okay, that's great, but if you spent 8 years of your life training as a radiologist, I'm not sure you're too keen.
I wouldn't recommend that.
I'm not sure you're too keen to be told, okay, you can get another job in healthcare, but you're going to have to go and spend however many years it is to become
And this is your point about the long
psychiatrist.
lifetime, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at how we're training radiologists and accountants and financial analysts, and the reality is they need to train for something different. I don't think the jobs disappear. I really don't. I think your point is exactly right. We don't want to lose the nurse in the hospital as parts of her job will get, or his job will get automated, like taking a blood sample and so forth. That will start to get automated, which is great. It will do it better and more efficiently, but patients in hospitals always at their exit statements say we wanted more time with a human being who understood what was going on, someone to talk to. That's where we put the nurse. I don't think we're taking advantage of this AI revolution anywhere near as much as we could be. I look at data on hours worked per week for Australians, and it's just going up and up. And all this automation that we currently have doesn't seem to be decreasing our working hours. We shouldn't be seeing...
Isn't that because we're being paid less, so we're having to work more hours to be able to keep the wall from the door?
I think it's
because our wages have stagnated.
Costs more to buy a house, and we have to work longer to pay off the mortgage. I think actually, house price to income ratios are actually a key driver of our longer working hours. But we should be making use of this artificial intelligence to increase leisure time, to refocus people's professions to where they have greater impact. There's a bunch of stuff in my job which is boring, like processing my credit card transactions. I have to do that. It should be fully automated. An algorithm can do that way better than I can, and can pick up if there's anything dodgy or if it's all correct. That can all happen algorithmically. And it's a pity to me that someone hasn't put in place that system, because it would free up me to think about something that was more useful.
But employers don't seem to want to pay to us to do less work. They want us to do more work for the same or even less pay.
If they're smart, they'll
I think dividing the world into employers and employees is a bit of a fallacy. I think the real question kind of globally is, am I as a consumer interested in paying for the labor of other people? Because employers are just intermediaries that help that to happen, right? At the level of the economy, the question is, do I want to consume the labor of other people? And I should only really be worried about automation if it creates a situation where I simply don't want what other people are offering. I don't want their labor.
But let's give a concrete example. Check-in person at an airport. Consumers are making it very clear they prefer to have lower airfares and have machines do the check-in. You see it happening more and more.
All kinds of specific job categories change over time.
So you can't rely on consumers making the right choice.
I'm not talking about consumers choosing. I'm saying consumers consuming is what the economy is all about. So if your labor is valuable to another consumer, an employment category is going to exist. I think you just gave an example where the labor isn't especially valuable to another consumer, and so things start to change.
The efficiencies we gain there get reinvested elsewhere in the economy.
Exactly.
It doesn't disappear, and that creates other types of jobs. The jobs we three have now didn't exist in 1900.
That requires trickle-down economics to work.
Well,
because the money
really
ends
true.
that's
up.
a different thing. I think the distribution of wealth in society is a huge issue, but it's not. We shouldn't be blaming this process. Efficiency doesn't have to mean unequal distribution of wealth. That's a consequence of poor policy that causes that to happen. We always want to drive towards efficiency. We want to look at mining operations where there are unsafe conditions going down those mines. We're taking that out. Accident rates are falling considerably as we put automation into mines. It's a better outcome all around. We absolutely want to do this and embrace automation. We should be looking, though, at what happens to people. And, I want to, in our work, start doing forecasting on people. We look at a job, we look at the likelihood that it gets automated, replaced or changed, because I do believe we're going into a period of more rapid than usual transition. And then we help work out a pathway to somewhere else. How transferable are these skills? What skills are likely to disappear and be done by a robot better? What skills do you have that we can redeploy somewhere else?
But isn't that one of the biggest challenges? I mean, if we just rest a second on whether more jobs remain after the transition or less, that the new jobs, one thing we do know with pretty certainty is the new jobs will require different skills to the old jobs. And how do we equip? How can we encourage, facilitate the people who are put out of work because their job gets more and more automated to have those new jobs?
Singapore has a digital retrain fund. If you are likely to lose your job to a computer, or it's going to happen, they pay you a small amount to retrain in different skills that will incubate you from or create a pathway for your career to go somewhere else. I think that's one policy mechanism. The living wage issue has been raised a lot. I think it's a good one for us to start to explore. And I think let's get a whole lot smarter as individuals and societies around proactive transitions in the labour market. Too many professions and jobs we can look at where the writing is absolutely on the wall for a very long period of time. Car manufacturing in Geelong, we can be finding pathways, and then a more agile workforce where the car manufacturing worker in Geelong, there was huge opportunity for them in the aged care sector with jobs that didn't require that much skill or training in that, lifting people and beds and trolleys and stuff in an aged care home. Lots of well-paid jobs actually there, but they didn't like the idea of moving from one to the other. Psychologically, it wasn't the sort of move that they wanted to make. It wasn't the right fit. So a much more agile labour market is what we need.
So I'm reminded, one feature we haven't spent much time talking about is the demographic change that's happening in our society. And there's a lovely observation that Rob Brooks, Australia is probably he's one of Australia's most famous roboticists, who said he reckons that robots are only going to arrive just in time because of our ageing population, that there'll be fewer people working and we need more robots to help with aged care.
I think it's a little strange to see the robots helping with aging care. I know this is something that people study, but
I think the Japanese seem to be embracing it.
I think here and there it's going to happen, but I think it's much more likely that these kinds of caring professions are going to draw in people who are displaced in other much more routinized kinds of tasks, because I think people want to be cared for by other people. I think there's something, it's much more effective. It's much more what people want. And people, I think, prefer to care for other people than they do to be on an assembly line, doing the same task over and over again. That makes you feel like a robot. That's the kind of thing a robot should do instead.
So what other, I'll name some similar things. So we've got aged care, healthcare, and I guess education. Childcare, yes, childcare, and education. So what other, those presumably, I'm guessing you're both going to agree are professions that are going to be not just at risk, but actually perhaps even in increasing demand for humans.
Yeah, education and healthcare have been the big job creators for Australia in the last 10 years and are likely to continue doing so. Our ageing population is going to fuel demand. I think embrace automation, but then redeploy those skills where it makes sense to do so. Don't lose the person. Look at putting them into where they're most productive, and that's the way we should be managing this transition. I don't think we are necessarily, but also some professions which we would think could be automated are highly stubborn and not automated. Baristas would be the one I would point to. Coffee machines and technology can make coffee better than a barista. I'm sorry if there's any baristas in the audience who are going to
well, there is Cafe X, San Francisco
machines
startup.
Are getting so good at doing this. They get the temperature exactly right. They have lots of different types of beans. You can rate them on your smartphone so that it learns what kind of coffee you like. But always at the airport, the barista queue is really long compared to the machine queue. All coffee shops still have baristas.
Is that not just being old-fashioned? That the coffee machines used to be rubbish. It used to be
point,
instant
Kevin,
coffee.
Something about the person buying that coffee is wanting a person.
We could employ someone just to have the conversation. Why waste their time making the coffee?
Possibly you could, but maybe because we're socially awkward beings, we need an excuse for a conversation.
I think we might be getting.
We could put a sign saying "Hug me" on him as well.
You could do. Yeah.
I think we might be getting hung up in the barista example a little bit too much. Right. I think that the broader point is there are lots of things that, I would rather have a person do for me than a machine. And I would pay more to have the person do it, even if the level of quality, sort of nominally was the same. And I think as long as we each can check with ourselves and verify that that's true, then our economy is fine in the broad sense. It doesn't mean that there won't be a lot of disruption. There won't be a lot of people who need to be retrained or who find that they're being asked to do something very different than they were doing before. But this notion that somehow robots are going to come in and just displace us all shouldn't worry us, as long as that remains true.
But before we move off barista, one other thing about baristas, they're nice people, but they're not very well paid. And that's a concern I have, that as an example of the increasing inequality, that the jobs that remain are either not very well paid.
Inequality is potentially a real problem
or CEO very well paid or excessively well paid.
I think we've got to take inequality a lot more seriously than we do. It has all sorts of nasty outcomes for a highly wealth unequal society that we want to avoid, and the trajectory we're on is in that direction. I don't blame technology for it. There is the Tyler Cowen view of the world that his book, The Average is Over, The Disappearing Middle Class, where he says his analogy is if you're a musician in 1900 here, you could only get to a certain number of bars and pubs to perform your music, and you were limited by geography, and you only had a certain small market share. But if you're a musician today, you can load it up onto iTunes and any number of platforms and sell digitally, and one musician can get this massive market share. And he argues that digital technology concentrates market share onto fewer individuals, and that is so his view is that we are moving into a world of an evaporating middle class, and digital will make that possible. But I guess the Joseph Stiglitz view in his book, The Cost of Inequality, and his really powerful book, he's arguing it's not really that digital actually can break down the barriers and allow that kid in India who doesn't have a degree and no chance of getting one but knows how to code can jump on and start providing services over freelancer.com. Or for a lot of people in the Philippines and India, those platforms have been fantastic. They've given them great job opportunities they never had before.
I mean, I taught a MOOC, one of these massive open courses to, at this point, I think 700,000 students. And there's always sort of this notion that, this means some kid in Mongolia can, who has no access to good education, can discover this thing. And to some extent, that's true, right? You do encounter these students.
And aren't you putting me and other professors of computer science out of work?
Somehow you still seem to have a job, Toby. I don't know.
But my vice chancellor might be looking at my case now.
I think the next thing I was going to say exactly speaks to that. I think that the reality is most students aren't that highly motivated student in Mongolia. Most students, have trouble showing up for lecture and, have trouble getting the assignment done and struggle with the concepts, and they really need the human touch. And I think what doing this MOOC has really persuaded me is the time I spend at the front of the classroom essentially pretending that I'm on TV might as well be replaced with me being on TV. And the time that I spend actually talking to my students and finding out what their problems are and reacting in real time is the place where I'm really adding value. And I think we should be doing more of that.
So that's absolutely the crux of it. There are parts of you we want to automate and put into MOOCs and the Khan Academy and all sorts of ways that you're teaching your students. We can improve the efficiency of information uptake for them in those ways. But then there's the interaction you have with your students. We wouldn't want to lose you. We'd want to refocus you on that because we know that one-on-one time, that takes a lot of time and it can't be automated, but it has a huge payoff. So that's if we get this AI revolution right, we do that with everyone's professions. We see incredible movement across the economy from low-value, unproductive use. We take that away and we put you into higher productive use. We build wealth and we get better outcomes. But I don't think we're doing a very good job at it.
So before we forget about musician, if you look at the music market, though, digital has killed the market in terms of making money from selling your music digitally. Musicians now make their money from performance.
Yeah.
But it's still not a bad time to be a musician. I mean, the business model has changed a bit, but everyone was sort of thinking doom and gloom about this. But actually, the performance is alive and well. The long tail is doing pretty well. I mean, I actually think this isn't such a bad time to be a musician. What era would you have preferred to be a musician in? Recording is much cheaper. There's much.
If you heard me sing, you'd say never.
But I'm sure you play beautifully.
If you heard me play any type of instrument, you'd say never.
I understand dollars per, royalties per song released is decreased slightly.
Yeah, because the market is now so frictionless.
But there's a lot more players in the market too, so a lot more people are able to be musicians. So
there are, but these are winner-take-all markets, and the person
So
getting the value is Spotify. It's not the musician. They've ballooned in value, and the individual has been squeezed by the fact that they don't have the market footprint.
But there really isn't a winner-take-all market. A winner-take-all market means, we have Katy Perry and no one else because she's the winner and she takes all. Like what we actually have is every crazy niche kind of music that you like has a flourishing ecosystem, which is instantly available.
You're missing the point. It's iTunes and Spotify that are making most of the money. I'm not arguing about the distribution of musicians.
But those musicians are making livings too.
The market, their value is being stolen by these intermediaries. The same with Uber, the same with Airbnb.
Well, now we've lapsed into communism.
No, but there are taxes in between. Unfortunately, the dream of the internet, where you could seamlessly connect producers with consumers, people who had cars and people who needed lifts, people who had spare beds. It turns out that Uber drivers are living in their taxes because they can barely make a living, and Uber is worth billions.
Well, it turns out that matchmaking role is incredibly valuable.
But you could do it in a distributed way without having to have an obscene company like Uber.
But record companies used to squeeze the musicians pretty hard. I'm not sure that it was worse before. It was better before.
But it's certainly not clear that the taxi market wouldn't be better if we had a distributed market in which people got all of the benefit from all of serving their customers. You're looking.
I think economic forces are pretty powerful. After a while, Uber drivers don't get a great return on investment.
No.
But then a lot of them are working this out and stopping it. I think we're going to see some changes in the taxi market. I think the Uber's not doing too well at the moment, actually, financially.
You should delete the app from your phone.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that market is really in flux. I think it's too soon to say what it looks like in a steady state.
But it seems that the dominant the market forces, the natural monopolies that exist here, that we've seen it not just in the taxi market, we've seen it in the hotel market with Airbnb, we see it in the music market with the number of music providers.
Well, some of these, though, get a huge amount of venture money to try something new. They operate at a loss, burning this venture money. They get people to do something for a while, and then they implode. So it's not clear that this is the future of work.
But we saw this with operating systems. Microsoft dominated because once they got too big, you couldn't have any competition, and then all of us had to pay more for our operating
and I suppose now you're getting into regulation, which is a good point, that governments have long recognized that it's important to prevent monopolies from exerting too much power in the economy, and that technology certainly has the capacity to create new monopolies that we might need to think about breaking or otherwise regulating.
Right. There is the theory of a natural monopoly, which is it's good to have a monopoly on something. You could argue it was good for Microsoft to have a monopoly on operating systems because we all got a standard. It might have actually been overall the most efficient way of doing it. If there were 1,000 different operating systems, the whole thing wouldn't have worked. So there is.
But they had to be fined in a big way to force them to actually use that position, not to dominate the market and actually innovate.
Right. And that's where you have these debates about what is a good monopoly and what's a not good monopoly that you want to break down. So monopolies aren't always bad in terms of efficiency.
But don't monopolies all have to be regulated?
Yeah, I think any marketplace needs regulation. No market works without regulatory involvement. So,
But this seems to be a story about the fact that we have these regulatory mechanisms already, and they kick in, maybe not perfectly, but we eventually do deal with these kinds of situations using the kind of political structures we already have.
Yeah, but other monopolies like big oil have had to be regulated, had special regulation.
Sure.
Telecoms, Marbell had to be broken up.
I'm sure it's going to keep happening. Yeah.
If we can do something that more efficiently utilises cars so that all these cars are being used more efficiently to bring prices down for customers, that's good. As long as safety and service quality is there, that's good. Same with hotel apartments. If we can utilise unused space in a city to bring prices down of staying in Melbourne tonight, if it's cheaper, that's good. We would want to see that happen. So this is the utilisation of resources which increases efficiency is positive. It ultimately builds wealth. I still leave open the question what we do with that wealth gets very important. We want to make sure everyone benefits from it. That's the equality issue, which I think we're not doing so well on. But efficiency is a good thing. And AI and digital that helps us move towards more efficiency is a very good thing. We need to be thinking carefully about how everyone gets a share of the benefit.
So another challenge in this new economy, if I'm allowed to call that you already alluded to, was that more and more of us are moving into this sort of gig economy. Mm-hmm. And there are challenges with that in terms of security, in terms of being given the time to have the education, re-education, and so on. What can we do about that? I mean, are we all going to eventually be working gig jobs?
I think there's a lot.
I don't know. Are we getting paid for this tonight, or is it?
No. You're just doing this.
Then I guess we won't.
This is a charity job, guys.
I mean, I think in some sense these gig jobs really are a way of getting around sort of entrenched monopolistic interests, right? Taxi companies before Uber, operated on this medallion system where somebody would get access to a medallion that could sell for $1 million for the right to have one of the 1,000 taxis in a given city that were carefully controlled by the city. And then that made taxi prices really high because they factored in the cost of this medallion. And Uber found kind of an end run around this where they could say it was ride sharing and it wasn't a taxi, and so there could be as many people driving taxis as wanted to do it in the city rather than being on the medallion system. And I think that really is about breaking down this kind of artificial monopolistic structure and letting people work who want to work. In the steady state, it's not clear where that ends up, but I think that does increase efficiency in the way that you were pointing out.
I think the platforms have taken away the transaction costs, so it's now feasible for me to acquire labour a lot more easily than it used to be. It was too hard to negotiate hiring someone previously, but now if I need someone to clean the gutter, to do my taxes, I can.
But there's a price to that. Well, I have no job security.
Yeah, so
now I can be, I don't know if I'm working tomorrow.
Yeah, I think
I don't get any holiday rights.
Yeah, this is dangerous and risky. I think there are some risks around the gig economy. I think a lot of us will struggle to operate in that environment. Some may do very well. Some individuals may really prosper and work out how to work the gig economy and get good outcomes from it. The other thing I think is in the developing world where their options aren't great, the incomes are very low, the gig economy for millions of people has been really very powerful and very good. They've been able to get jobs that were otherwise not possible, a lot of it coding and computer jobs, and they're getting a lot of benefit. So it doesn't feel so great for us being in an affluent country where we're GDP per capita here is like 50,000. Some of these countries have GDP per capita at 2,000. What they consider a good wage, we consider an awful wage, and that's digital takes us across the boundaries.
It also really gives people a lot of control over their own work schedules. If they need to, care for a parent or a child, if they, you don't have to ask your employer for permission to stop working. I think that's very empowering for workers.
Yeah.
I think it's uncharted territory, but I think many of these things have political responses. If we think certain modes of work are exploitative of workers, that's something we regulate. That's something historically we've regulated, since the Industrial Revolution. And I think there's going to be a role for regulation to continue around all of these things.
So if we remember the Industrial Revolution, there were 50 or more years of pain. People's quality of life didn't improve.
It doesn't mean we have to take 50 years each time, though.
Well, so I'm going to say, and this revolution is going to happen quicker. It's going to disseminate quicker than the Industrial Revolution because you needed expensive bits of steam engine, you needed capital to do that, and it propagated around the world rather slowly. It started in England and then spread over a course of decades around the rest of the world. This time it takes no capital to reproduce code. The information disseminates almost instantly. It's going to happen arguably quicker.
So history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, according to Mark Twain. He said that, and I think.
What does it rhyme with?
Well, we see similarities. The Industrial Revolution, I don't think, is proven itself as a great model for what's happening to us now. It's all we've got, so we talk about it a lot, and we relate it to the information revolution, or the fourth industry 4.0 is another term that's used to describe where we're at the moment. But it isn't to say that what happened in the Industrial Revolution is just going to play out again.
But are we seeing the beginnings of the pain already here, now, today?
Something is definitely going on with, when I was at the OECD last year and we had a briefing on the sort of, it was all a pretty glum story of wages are flatlining, productivity is declining, debt to GDP ratios are really rising for OECD countries, so public sector debt is really high. It was a pretty glum picture, and
well, I'm glad we've got all of this automation to increase our productivity.
Well, this is the productivity paradox. Why is the last 20 years of digital not associated with increases in productivity and stronger improvements in wages as well? Why are we not seeing the benefits of it? So that's got a lot of us scratching our heads. There's a paper the OECD put out called The Productivity Paradox. We don't get it. We think it should be, but it isn't.
See, economists are never going to be able to help us.
I think, something is going wrong in our uptake and use of artificial intelligence, automation and digital technology. There was one argument that we're at the early phases of adjusting to a new way of working, and that period of adjustment is going to be associated with lackluster performance in terms of wages and jobs and all the other stuff that I've just described. So possibly that's what's going on. We're working out how to play in this new world economy that's digitally enabled, where the rules are different. There is transaction costs have disappeared. The asymmetries of information. Ronald Coase's theory of the firm may get proven wrong this century. I think he won the Nobel Prize for why we saw big firms grow and become the dominant way of organising market and the economy last century. And it was because of transaction costs and asymmetries of information. They are disappearing in this platform world, and a new model may be taking over. So one of the theories in the OECD is that we're just going through this period of adjustment, and when we figure it out, it'll be all right.
I think it's undoubted that when we have these efficiency gains, we're richer as a society. We can produce more stuff in less time. We can make better use of the human resources we have. But, I mean, as you've said, I think the real challenge is how we then choose to distribute those gains across the whole society. And we have tremendous freedom to do that in different ways. And we see different societies around the world that have made this choice in very different ways.
Yeah.
And to me, it really seems like an insufficient government response to all of this change that has been too hands-off, that has been too stingy with the safety net, and that has been willing to tolerate too high levels of inequality.
Yeah.
And I think we've had these neoliberal ideologies in the last 20 or 30 years that really say the more hands-off the government is, the better. And I think that's a poor fit for all of this technological change that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I really think so. I think a high wealth unequal society is not a place you want to be. Even if you're rich, you're better off living in an equal society where everything starts to work better. Crime rates are lower. Environmental pollution is less likely to be lower. All these studies have been done in economics correlating wealth inequality with undesirable outcomes. It's not what we want. Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Switzerland all have very low Gini coefficients. They also do really well in terms of life expectancy, education. A bunch of other indicators are looking really good. So I think that this is something we haven't tackled enough, that associated with this digital revolution is an issue around inequality. And we're in the driver's seat. We can start to make some decisions about how that plays out.
So not leaving this really important, I think, central question of inequality, there's one part of inequality that I worry about quite significantly that often is ignored in the debate, which is the inequality between the first and third world, and how the fear that one of the fears I have, which is that we used industrialization to help lift ourselves up, or lift our society up, and make it a better society. And the fear I have is that the third world will miss that out now completely. They'll miss out on industrialization because many of the jobs that are currently being outsourced to the third world can be brought back on shore and done by machines.
I hope they do. I think that it would be a sad thing for the third world to have to go through all of the stages that we went through because it was a long road.
But they'll just be left poor now.
No, I don't think that's true. I think there's this idea of leapfrogging. There's this notion that you can have a technology that was produced after several different generations of social change. People in the third world never went through having landlines. They went straight to mobile phones. And mobile phones enable new ways of working that weren't possible with landlines. If you want to be a driver, you can give your number out to somebody and go to sleep in your car, and then they can phone you and wake you up. And that doesn't work with a landline. And there are lots of different ways that the third world can start to have an economy that looks like the economy we're making for ourselves now, rather than having to go have their own industrial revolution and go through that whole 150 years.
How do they pay for a healthcare system, or how do they pay for an education system so they can even begin that process?
How can they pay for it with their own labor, by providing goods and services to each other?
No, but we're already running at that speed. We've got a very healthy education system. Everyone gets educated, and
I think education is the real question for the third world.
Lots of us go to university.
They're
You can't begin playing in this new economy unless you're educated, and they don't even have the money to provide everyone with education.
But luckily, education is a good that multiplies pretty fast, right? A few educated people can teach some other people, and I don't think that's a huge problem. I think we should care a lot more about helping the third world to develop a robust education system.
If as a child you get sent to work in the field because you can't have food otherwise, and
that's exactly why we should be happy about automation coming to the third world, so the child doesn't have to be sent to the field. That's my point.
But that
I mean, it
requires-
used to be the case that 80% of our population worked in agriculture. Today in Uganda, where I've done a lot of work, 80% of the population still works in agriculture. I think it would be awesome if automation came to Uganda so that all of those people weren't doing
But
subsistence farming.
they can't afford to begin. They can't afford to go and buy the tractors.
But,
I mean,
but
you
the,
can-
the automation causes things to become cheaper. That's what automation is.
But a
It's
tractor's
reduction
not
in the
going to
cost of
become that
things.
much cheaper.
So over the last 20, have you seen the elephant graph of income growth since the 1980s, which shows percentage increase in average income for right across the world? You know, developing world, especially developing Asia, has done incredibly well. Vietnam, China, Taiwan, year-on-year GDP growth rates around 9%, whereas we're growing at 2%. So their GDP per capita income is growing much, much faster over there than it is here. You know, I think it's partly this leapfrog effect. You know, did Vietnam need to build a postal service? I remember a discussion coming up. It could just go straight to email and logistics. It didn't actually need to go through the same development pathway we had. And the returns on tech in the developing world are much higher than they are here. We put a whole bunch of tech into Australia, it's good. Put a whole bunch of tech into a developing country, it has a much bigger impact in terms of raising living standards because they've got further to go. So we're living through a period of amazing time in economic history. 1.02 billion people across Asia go from being low income to middle income. And that's an incredible transformation that's going on around us. So I don't think any of this sort of technology is bad for the developing world. We're seeing something change. I think if anything, the developed and the wealthy countries are faced with, you know, their position is not looking as stable as it once was.
Okay, let's open it up now to the floor.
Just picking up on the points that have just been made. Hans Rosling's TED talk actually talks about exactly the sort of stuff you're talking about how the growth of income in third world countries is actually closing the gap between. So recommend that TED talk for anybody who's interested. My real point, though, is the issue for me is I think the education system is not actually preparing us very well for the long term. Because the point that you made about do you want to consume the labour of other people requires that the education system trains people to be able to interact and understand what other people want and be able to deliver on that. Whereas in many cases, the response to retraining people is to teach them another expendable skill that might get them through the next 5 years, but teaching someone how a particular programming language is a very short-lived skill. Teaching them how to communicate, to think logically, to do those sorts of bits and pieces, those long-term skills are where the real future is for people. And I don't think our education system does a very good job at that, because it jumps at the quick money that's made that's there to retrain somebody from one ephemeral skill to another ephemeral skill.
You know, with the amount that our society has changed in the last 60 years, it's remarkable how little our education system has changed in that same period of time, and that should make us pretty suspicious. So I really tend to agree with you that we really need to start thinking radically about what we do in education that works and what doesn't, what we need to focus on, which skills we give people that are valuable to them and which aren't. The sector that we're in, I think, is really ripe for disruption.
I just wrote a white paper for the New South Wales Department of Education telling them exactly that. I think you're completely right.
You touched on the issues of the gig economy and sort of the importance of the social safety net in response to growing inequality and job displacement. I guess I'm interested in the panel's view on the viability of universal basic income, and if it is viable, what sort of form do you think it would take?
Look, I think it's the beginning of a really important discussion and set of thinking. I'm not sure if the idea of a universal basic income, how it gets operationalised or made to happen, but I think we should absolutely be looking at this to ensure that everyone in Australia makes this transition into a digital economy and no one's left behind severely. We're wealthy enough to ensure that doesn't happen, and there's a lot of benefit to our society for making that not happen. Now, I think the practicalities of making a universal income actually happen, it's hard to sort of work through all that, but you're in exactly the right space. We should be putting our best brains into thinking about the way that Australians have general equality of opportunity to move into what I think is going to be quite a different economy. That we don't want to see the Australia where only a small minority of us do very well and get awesome jobs in ICT, and then big chunks of regional Australia or parts of Australia are completely missing out and suffer low wages, unemployment and everything that comes with it. We've absolutely got to put our minds to that one, and I don't think we've thought about it enough because it's gradually happening. It's a bit of a slow boil phenomenon.
So I think you put your finger on it. The viability is one of the really important issues that we need to work out. Here's an unashamed plug in my new book, It's Alive, available all leading bookstores and on the Kindle. I actually do some of the analysis on the viability as we can see it today. You take the adult population of the United States, you multiply that by $20,000 or whatever you think is a small enough income that you can afford people to live on. Not a great income, but just enough to be able to survive, you get exactly the current US federal budget. So that means you can afford it if you can decide that you can give up all the other things that you provide with the US federal budget, like education, like defense, like national parks, like environmental protection. Otherwise, you have to say, where are we going to get this extra income? What taxation system is going to provide us, the same again that we already get?
I think the broader point is that we live in societies that are rich enough that they can provide for all of their citizens a reasonable basic life, and automation and increasing efficiencies from new technologies mean that as a society we get richer. So this means that becomes only easier for us to do. So the question is really sort of a political one about what our priorities are, and a sort of marketing one of which way of packaging it up we find the most palatable. I think. Sure, if we paid everybody in the United States $20,000, maybe we'd have a problem, but there would be macroeconomic consequences that would come from the injection of all of this money into the American economy. Not everybody would need to be paid this amount because many of them are doing fine as it is. It's
no longer universal basic income then. It's just welfare as we know it.
Yeah.
Maybe so, but then I think otherwise it would be like the Fed printing money. But
the Fed prints money all the time.
Exactly, which is why I don't think it's such a problem.
And it will continue to do so.
So they could just give us some.
It links to our previous question about education in that there are no silver bullets except I think for possibly education. Eventually that could solve everything. That education and training is a significant area that we can look into to level the field and create opportunity if we give the right people the right sorts of educations to move into new jobs and become more agile in the labour market. I think that is a big part of it as well, is not just universal basic income, but universal skills, ensuring people have the right skills to make the transitions they need to do as individuals. In our research, I want to get down to really granular job forecasting at the national level where we can look at an individual, look at the risks to their job, where they're at, and then identify a transition pathway and say, look, you've got these sorts of skills. This is a geographic region you could transition into, a new industry and a new type of job, which we think would be a pretty good transition. Plus, we want you to make it sooner rather than later. It's much easier to get a job when you've already got a job, not after you've lost it. We know that for sure. Once you've lost your job, the longer you stay unemployed, the harder it is to get another one. So we want the transitions to happen sooner, and that's part of where I think it's not just sort of giving everyone a universe, giving them the opportunity to make these shifts by skilling them up, creating information environment that helps them that might help as part of this challenge.
I think it's a mix of this kind of retraining and then safety net or redistribution.
Right.
I think the core question is one you raised before, which is the extent to which the dynamics of the new economy create a winner-take-all distribution of wealth, or whether that doesn't have to be the case. If it really does have to be the case, I think we're forced to have some kind of redistribution.
Yeah.
Okay, question at the front row.
Two questions. First, how optimistic are each of you that we will solve the inequality problem? And secondly, how do well, what can we in Australia do to prevent all the gains of technological efficiency being sort of swallowed up by a small number of American tech companies?
We could invite some of the tech companies in America to come here because they're not real happy with what things are over there at the moment. But that'd be one. But I think Australia has to speed up a bit and keep pace with the change that's going on around it. We've built wealth over the last century, but the way the marketplace around Australia is operating, China is transitioning. It's our biggest trading partner by far, and it grows 10% every year. It's transitioning out of industrial into a service sector economy. It doesn't want so much raw materials to run itself. We need to be looking at what this new economy wants, so that the world doesn't know us are living in Australia. We've got to do a much better job, I think, of moving faster, figuring out what this digital economy of the future looks like, working out what the new industries of the future look like and starting to build towards them actively. And government plays a huge role here. Government was central to Silicon Valley, to Pittsburgh and steel. We've looked at a whole bunch of case studies of how regions have transitioned from one industry to another. Government plays a very important role in making those transitions happen. So, but that's one of my concerns, is that Australia is not moving anywhere near fast enough. We're complacent. The mining boom did make us complacent. When iron ore was $200 a tonne, we didn't have to think too hard. We just had to dig it up and sell it. But it isn't anymore, and we will not be assured of that being the case into the future. So that's part of it. Was that the whole...
Inequality? I'm actually really reasonably pessimistic. If we look at, I know you're
starting to pick up on that.
Okay, I know you told me not to keep talking about the Industrial Revolution, but we had automation through the Industrial Revolution, and if you look at what else happened around that time, it doesn't seem that the automation in the Industrial Revolution actually improved inequality. It was more likely the events like the Great Depression and the two World Wars, and then the institutions that we created as a consequence of those, things like the welfare state, the National Health Service, pension systems, that were the factors that actually meant we had a temporary a decrease in inequality, and then after those had started to propagate through, we've actually then in the last 40 years or so just seen an ever increase in the inequality in our societies, and there's some question about whether it's not just automation that's driving that, but it's as you read in Piketty's Capitalism in the 21st Century, a fundamental flaw of really the capitalist free market, which is that wealth is concentrated in those who have capital.
I think in that point, I think Piketty's broadly right, and I think that really makes this a political question more than a technological question. I think every society struggles with concentration of wealth and inequality, and the response to it is political. Some societies say, we're not willing to tolerate this, and every society sort of finds the level of inequality that it's willing to tolerate. And I think really the question is, for each of our societies, where is that threshold going to be?
We've talked a lot about the sort of role of automation in changing the landscape of work and employment opportunities. In the context of this wider discussion about AI, what happens when we start to be able to build machines that are better at the thinking and the rational jobs that we have? People in scientific and mathematical fields, research fields, even in computer science themselves. What happens when we start to build machines that are better at that than we are?
Well, we've already been building machines that can do bits of our science, but we're not going to run out of science. We'll just be able to do the science quicker. So I doubt there can be any fewer scientists. It's a very open-ended job.
Absolutely. I mean, the notion that we somehow identify ourselves with these rational abilities is sort of bait and switch from the Enlightenment. I mean, really, how good are any of us at these things? When a computer, beat Garry Kasparov at chess, and everyone said, "What a terrible blow this is to humankind." I mean, how many of us can play chess better than a computer 10 years before that? This is not the defining thing that makes us human.
And there are still as many grandmasters playing chess professionally then as now. Okay, we have time for one last question, and then I'm afraid we're going to be running out. So, question here at the front. Thank you.
Yes, I have two questions. The first question...
Tricky.
And then you can just give the second question to whoever wants to ask another question. They can do the same.
My first question is, I'm interested to know about this the artificial intelligence and this blockchain technology, how this is going to impact the accounting professions, number one. And number two, this, because of this automation, if I have, I know the job are two types, routinized and unroutinized jobs. So routinized job is going to wipe out, I know very well from the discussion, but what about this unroutinized job where need the cognitive skills? Now, if as an accountant, as a professional chartered accountant, we think about, we take analysis we do and give decision for the managers. Now, if this job is taken by the managers, how you guarantee that you'll give me a reasonable another professions where I can use my skill?
Yeah,
Okay,
look,
Stefan, you do blockchain, and
Okay.
you can answer the final.
Blockchain is quite fascinating and I think could be quite profoundly disruptive. We've written a whole report on it just recently and we're trying to get into looking at what might happen in cryptocurrency markets, which have moved so much in recent times.
Up and down.
Up and down, right. They've been highly volatile and we can't, my Bayesian statistician on the team has just concluded yesterday it's impossible to forecast Bitcoin prices. So, yeah, but we're trying and we're going to keep trying. But I think the fact that we can transact without an intermediary is significant. If we were to put some of the blockchain solutions into play, into auditing and to legal contracting, yes, there would be implications for auditors and tax and accountants because we have complete visibility through the system and we know where all the money is and where it's flowing. We don't need 100 auditors, we need one. But I still think...
Which is ironic why we get all this fraud in the blockchain market.
But I think in time, if it happens this way, accounting profession has to learn blockchain really quickly. You'll need to learn that skill. You'll need to understand how these systems are working and what they're doing. They're going to create new challenges. If you actually can do blockchain at the moment and do the coding and algorithms behind it, you can command a very big salary in Australia at the moment. It is hard to get that skill set, right? We can, and there'll be security issues around it. Blockchain isn't a secure system totally, and there are privacy issues around it. There are strategy questions around then what we do with all of this, and there is going to be no shortage of need for you if you keep pace.
Kevin, I don't know if
Yeah,
you need to
let me
answer.
speak very quickly to both points, consciously of the time. To blockchain, cryptocurrencies more generally, I feel like the biggest impact they're going to have is macroeconomic. I think they make national currency controls way less effective than they are now. They mean that countries can't help but be part of the global economy whether they want to or not. And I think in terms of, what does it mean for a knowledge worker like an accountant as AI technologies get better? I think for the foreseeable future, what it means is you will have access to increasingly powerful tools that will do some of the things that you used to do, and they'll basically make you more powerful than you were before. That'll change the kind of work you do. It might change the number of different jobs you can do within a period of time, but I don't think you'll stop being an accountant.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we're going to have to end there. And just please now join with me with thanking my panelists for all of their wonderful answers.
Yeah, that's